The Florida Gators start spring football today. It's a glorious day. Here's what you need to look out for.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. Happy Thursday. Happy first day of spring football. I'm Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay with us for the Armada Team of the Week later in the episode. And I do think that we need to talk about some things that you look for in spring ball, right? Which it is also important to acknowledge that while this is spring ball, and while it is not, full go 24/7, all that stuff, it is still very important in the team process for the season. And one thing that we need to look out for, and again, we're not going to get to see these things up close and personal. They give media like 7 minutes of practice that they get to actually watch. It's nothing. And we'll see clips, and we're going to see a lot of clips of this, and we've already seen clips of this. Wide receivers, because for the Florida Gators, you need to figure out which wide receivers are going to step up because you've lost a lot of production there, right? Like you look at who left from 2024. It's Chimdike, it's Elijah Badger. Arlis Boardingham's a tight end, but he had the fourth most catches on the team. You lost him. So you've lost 3 out of your top, 4 receivers in terms of catches, and the guy that's in that top 4 was Trey Wilson, who played 4 games. That's it. You're losing 81 catches from Chimdike and Elijah Badger. You're losing 1,589 yards from Chimdike and Elijah Badger and 6 touchdowns. You lost all that with just those 2 receivers. Cool. Looking at what we can see, it's going to be looking at how these receivers perform. And then, of course, there's going to be the closed practice sessions that media will not be able to see and there will not be clips of. But so far, when we look at the clips that we've seen and that they put out, receivers look good, right? We see the receivers running routes. They're running around cones. They're running around bags, whatever it may be. They look good. They always do, though. And here's the thing. They're always going to look good. As long as Billy Napier is the head coach of the University of Florida, they're always going to look good in those spring clips because they look in those clips like fluid athletes. Wow. Florida, who has recruited fluid athletes at receiver, they look like fluid athletes. Who would have ever predicted this? Right? Like they look good. They look like athletes. We're going to see clips of them running routes on air. We won't get to see them go, well, we may get to see like a couple of days. We'll see one-on-ones, but we won't get to see one-on-ones extensively. We won't get to see full team drills. But what they need to figure out in the private part of this is who's stepping up as a route runner, who's stepping up as a receiver that can create separation. Because when you look at when they're actually on the field, it's not just about athleticism, right? Like we know that they've recruited fluid athletes. We know that they've recruited fast receivers, which are not the same things, okay? Fluid athlete, fast receiver, not the same thing. They've recruited both. They've got some guys that are just fast, some guys that are fluid athletes, and some guys that are both. But playing receiver is so much more than just, look at how athletic this guy is. It's more than that. It's not just athleticism. It's not just speed. There's so much technique involved in playing receiver that I think a lot of people overlook. I'm not saying, oh yeah, casuals overlook it. I think diehards overlook it. I think national media overlooks it. I think just team media for every level overlooks the route running ability that receivers have. And they just see, oh, he's fast as hell. Just send him deep and he'll be good. That's not how it works. You need to be able to run routes and create separation. And that's what you look for in the spring right now. That should be one of the determining factors for who's climbing up the depth chart or who's getting passed up on the depth chart. It's who can actually run routes. Like, again, we won't get to see much of them. We'll get to see a little bit, but even when we see the routes on air, they're usually not going 100%. You don't usually know how they're running routes. And also, one thing that I don't think Florida has necessarily done a good job of developing with route runners has been route tempo. Ricky Pearsall was kind of the only one that was really good at switching up route tempo, which is not running every route at the same speed, right? Maybe I'll run 75% speed on just this upward part of the post. And then once I break, I full sprint. And you get into going that. And we haven't seen Florida in the past couple of years outside of Ricky Pearsall have someone who really runs with different levels of route tempo. That's something I'd like to see happen. That's something I'd like to see from any of these receivers out there. Like, okay, we'll see that. Hopefully. But now you get more legit route running opportunities. Okay. And that's what I mean. When I say legit route running opportunities, I mean, you're going up again. This is more involved than the clips that we've seen in recent weeks of them just running routes in the facility around bags. Now we get to see more one-on-ones, more team drills where they're actually going up against a defender that is trying actively to stop them, which defense is usually ahead of offense. We'll see. But now you get to see more of those, more, again, legit route running opportunities. This is the time where we need to see, and when I say we need to see, I'm not saying literally we need to see. Like I've said before, we're not going to get to actually see much of this, but we'll get the reports about who's impressing, who's not. But we need to see something from the high school guys. And I don't mean the high school freshmen that are coming in right now. I mean the guys that Florida has recruited out of high school, the guys that this coaching staff has recruited out of high school. Because, again, that's not something we've seen much of, right? In 2022, you weren't going to see that because they were all true freshmen, right? So you weren't really going to see much production from any of the high school guys. Fine. 2023, you had a ton of catches from Trey Wilson, but almost all of them were behind the line of scrimmage. And other freshmen in that year, Andy Jean had 6 catches. Aiden Mizell had 2 catches. And that was it for the true freshmen in 2023. And then in 2024, the guys that Napier recruited out of high school, you had Trey Wilson had 19 catches before he got hurt. Again, a lot of it was underneath. You had Aiden Mizell had 17 catches, couldn't routinely get in the rotation for whatever reason. I don't agree with it, but it's the fact. Tank Hawkins had 10 catches, if I'm not mistaken, 6 of which came against UCF. And then you had TJ Abrams had 2 catches, and that was it for the high school class, for the high school receivers that Florida's recruited. This is the time where you don't have the portal depth to be overly reliant on, because every year it's been portal receivers that have been the leaders, except for 2022, which was, if I'm not mistaken, I think Xavier Henderson had the most catches for the team in 2022. Yeah, Xavier Henderson had 36, which was most on the team. Ricky Pearsall had more yards and less catches, but I'm talking about the catches and getting used like that, like getting the volume. And we haven't seen that, but you don't have the portal guys anymore. You don't have Ricky. You don't have Chim. You don't have Badger. Now it's time for the guys that Florida recruited out of high school to step up. There's J. Michael Sturdivant from the portal, of course. But outside of that, it's high school guys. It's guys that this coaching staff needs to step up. And their success will be dependent on how have they been developed as route runners. So I know that this past offseason, I know that there were quite a few people that agreed or disagreed with me about saying that I think Florida should have upgraded from Billy Gonzalez as wide receiver coach. This is the year we're going to find out for sure, because there's no more bringing in a ton of portal guys that do all the work for you. Now it's about having high school receivers that you've developed for years and see how they develop and see how they actually work and pan out for your roster. No more excuses. So very interested to see how that works out. We are going to talk more about spring ball when we get back with Locked On Gators. The Armada Team of the Week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, our Locked On College basketball experts are picking one team that stands apart, from top-seeded stars to the unexpected upsets. These guys showcase the strength and sheer power needed to push their team forward, which they're not the team of the week this week, but I do want to give a shout-out to BYU. That game against Iowa State was crazy. It was nuts. I can't believe they played that poorly and still won. Nuts. Ridiculous to see. This week's Armada and clear-cut team of the week are the Houston Cougars. Incredible defensive team there. Since joining the Big 12 last season, the Cougars have gone a combined 33-4 in conference games, winning the regular season title by multiple games both years. That's nuts, right? When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what the Houston Cougars have done here. It's clear that our team of the week is out here ready and to conquer the road ahead with confidence, which I don't know how far they'll make it in March Madness. I'm going to be honest with you. I'll take a shot at them. I don't think they're that great. Just want to throw that one out there. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, and Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free with us in the podcast and on YouTube. And I touched on, developing youth. And I mentioned saying that now's the time for high school receivers, not this class, but the guys that you've recruited from high school, to step up. However, that doesn't say that the true freshman Dallas Wilson, Vernon Brown III can't contribute, right? That'd be ludicrous to say. Ludicrous. I almost said ridiculous, and I was like, no, what? Ridiculous isn't crazy enough. I need it to be ludicrous. Due to injuries, which we'll talk a bit more about later on. We're going to wrap up talking about some of those. And due to players leaving the roster, whether that's through the portal, through the draft, there are a lot of snaps available on this roster, right? And when I talk about the youth on the team, I'm usually talking about guys who are either part of the 2024 or were part of the 2024 class or are part of the 2025 class. So when I talk about youth, that's usually who I'm talking about. And when we talk about all the guys that have left, there's a path to playing time, right? And luckily, the Florida Gators, I want to make this clear too. The Florida Gators may have lost quite a few guys, had a lot of guys go to the NFL draft. They had, I think, 7 at the combine. They've had guys transfer out. Luckily, most of those guys that left, you kind of see their successor, right? A lot of the guys that left, you see their successor. You know who's replacing them. You know who's available. The portal guys are maybe the bigger ones, but before we even talk about the youth movement in Gainesville, Joseph Mbachu, Miles Johnson, defensive lineman, Joseph Mbachu, linebacker Miles Johnson, running back Byron Lewis, cornerback Onis Konanbani, wide receiver Muiz Tonkara, offensive lineman Daniel Pierre-Lewis, and kicker Evan Knoll are the 7 players not expected to be part of this spring ball session. They're supposed to be summer enrollees, so there's that. But for most of the guys that have left, there's people available to take snaps, right? Shamar James is at the NFL draft. Jaden Robinson is stepping up into his place. Then that leaves the void where Jaden Robinson was. That goes to Miles Graham, Aaron Childs. They're going to compete for those snaps. Jack Pyburn, TJ Searcy, they're gone. Okay. That opens up playing time for LJ McCray, Cam James, Jaden Woods. That opens up playing time for all of those guys. Cam Jackson is in the NFL draft. Okay. Jamari Lyons, injured, not going to be available yet. But Cam Jackson, NFL draft. Desmond Watson, going to be working out at the pro day. And then you've got Jamari Lyons still out. Again, injuries. That means that you're going to see Mekhi Boyroe and DeAndre Robinson get snaps with the first team at nose tackle. Jaden Woods, true freshman, is likely going to be participating in first or second team snaps with the edge, probably second team, but first or second team snaps at the edge room because of injuries available, right? Or because of injuries that have piled up. We're going to talk about the corners in the next segment, but Ben Hanks Jr., someone that could earn playing time because right now, most of the reps that are going to be taken up are going to be by depth players or players that you anticipate will be depth this year. And so when you look at all the snaps available, there's a lot of guys that can come in here as young players, step up and earn playing time, right? It should happen. Amir Jackson, the tight end that everybody talked about last year, who I will say, I will spin the block on this one. I told you guys he wasn't going to play. I told you he wasn't going to be part of the rotation. That wasn't going to happen as a true freshman. You need time to learn to play tight end in this offense. Explained it a million times before. It's incredibly complex, right? But again, there are paths to playing time for the young players, especially those we haven't seen play much, right? LJ McCray did not play much last year. There's a path to playing time for him this year. Fletcher Westphal didn't play much last year, right? I don't know if there's so much a path to playing time, but there's a path to him solidifying a tackle spot in the 2 deep, which matters because that means that he's going to get some snaps with the first team. If they do the rotating offensive line thing, they do the rotating offensive line thing. But if there's an injury, he's going to be thrown into that. Okay? Montreal Johnson's gone. That leaves snaps available for a guy like Katie Daniels if he's going to be able to earn them, right? There's a lot of snaps available for the young guys that we can see, like Teddy Foster. He's another one who he can earn playing time at corner. I think this is a great time to have these battles, right? Because again, a lot of the starters that left, we kind of know who's going to take those spots. For most of them, we kind of know who's going to take those spots. Or at least we have a guy in mind that we say, hey, he should be the one, right? Maybe he doesn't perform up to expectations or up to standards, but we have a guy that we look at and we say, hey, he should be the one that takes over that spot. Like Jamari Lyons should be the guy that takes over the nose tackle spot, right? Stuff like that where you go, he should be the one that steps up. Jaden Robinson should be the guy that takes Shamar James' spot. Things like that. We kind of have a guy in mind that we go, okay, he should be the one taking these snaps. Then behind him, you go, okay, that's open competition. And that's what you want. You want the rotational spots and the depth spots to be the ones where you say, hey, that's open season, open competition. That is where we hopefully see some of the freshmen take over, whether they're true freshmen, redshirt freshmen. That is where we hopefully see the youth movement really kick in. Not saying, hey, you know who should be the starting lineup? Dallas Wilson, Vernell Brown III, Jaden Woods, Ben Hanks Jr., Lagonza Hayward, Hilton Stubbs. All of them should be starters from day one. That's silly, right? That's not how it should work out. And I'll tell you one of the reasons too. That's not a formula for a winning team. Okay? If you go, yeah, we got 6 true freshman starters. That is not a formula to say that you're a winning team. That means that you recruited a bunch of high school kids who can come in and outperform your upperclassmen. That means usually that your upperclassmen aren't that good. So I don't want them taking starting spots. And I've also been very open about this, that I'm not a huge fan of saying, hey, we need to rely on these freshmen to be big-time contributors, right? I've said that before. I don't think that that's a good sign. If you're going, yeah, we need these freshmen to be SEC starter quality guys. Not ideal. But rotational players that are working their way up to speed, I'm all for that. Let them earn their market share at their position. Let them earn their snap share at their position. And the secondary is a spot where a lot of snaps are up for grabs right now. We'll talk about that situation when we get back with Locked On Gators. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. And to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Gators, we are talking about the defensive back room, which we've kind of talked about in recent weeks, but something more specific now that we actually have some information on who's going to be available and who's not. According to On3, Sharif Denson, Aaron Gates, both of your stars, both of your nickel players, are not going to be full go to start the year, right? Or to start spring. Sharif Denson is expected to be a non-contact guy early on. Aaron Gates, we honestly have no idea if he's even going to be healthy for the season. So you can assume he's not going to be doing anything in the spring. So Sharif Denson, non-contact. Aaron Gates, not playing, leaves the star spot wide open. And we've talked about this during the first portal opening, we talked about, hey, Florida should be looking at these guys for star because Aaron Gates probably going to miss a good chunk of at least spring and fall camp, maybe the season. Not saying he's going to miss the whole season, but there is I think, decent chance he's not going to be available for the start of the season. And so you should be looking at star for those spots. Fine. It's going to be Josiah Davis is a guy that was there last year that should be stepping up this year to see more playing time. But that competition is going to be wide open, right? Like, it wouldn't shock me if you saw Florida say, hey, Hilton Stubbs, Laganza Hayward, one of you guys are going to be playing star a bit, or you guys are going to be playing safety and Bryce Thornton will come play star. It wouldn't shock me if we saw something like that, at least for the time being, because those snaps are available, right? Safety room, relatively healthy. But then the corner room, toughy, right? Dijon Johnson, a guy that I view as a starting corner. I know that we've talked a lot this offseason, and people always bring it up on Twitter and Discord and at the Insider program, where they talk about, well, who's going to be the starting corners? It's not a thing I truly view as a competition right now. I kind of look at the starting corners and I say, okay, well, it's probably going to be Devin Moore and Dijon Johnson because, I mean, one, both of those guys played well last year when they were healthy. But two, I have no reason to think that the coaching staff is going to replace them. I don't. I think the coaching staff loves Dijon Johnson and they love Devin Moore. And when healthy, I think that those guys will be the starters. But of course, there's a Cormani McClain that could step up and take playing time. Jameer Grimsley's a name that people bring up often, but he's not going to be full go at start of camp. So can't really say him, right? But corner is a spot that is potentially very wide open right now. Like, again, Dijon Johnson's not available at the start of camp. Devin Moore is expected to be full go at the start of camp today, so we'll see that. Or we'll see how true that rings. And, like, there's probably going to be somebody in a non-contact jersey or something like that during camp today that we don't have that information yet, right? There will be someone that it's like, yeah, he pulled a hammy running 2 days ago or something like that. There's going to be people that we don't know all the information of because we don't get all the information. But corner's a spot that's wide open right now for competition. I mentioned last segment, Ben Hanks Jr., Teddy Foster. Those are two guys that can step in and at least compete for a rotational spot because we can assume that Florida going to rotate at those spots because it's something that they've done a lot. The only time that they didn't really rotate was last year when Jason Marshall Jr. was healthy. They weren't really rotating him out. The other corner was rotating, but Jason Marshall Jr. was not rotating. And then at the end of last year, everyone was hurt. Like, everybody was hurt, so they weren't rotating then. Again, don't forget, last year they had to move Triquez Bridges from safety to corner because of injuries. So corner was the spot that was banged up last year and it's banged up still going into spring right now. The staff, interestingly enough, and this is a thing we talked about when he was getting recruited, and this is a thing we talked about when he committed out of the portal, but the staff reportedly views Southern Miss transfer DB Michael Caraway Jr. as more of a corner than anything else, an outside corner. And I'm really curious about that, or at least right now, that's how they view him. And I'm really curious about that. I'm not sure so much if they're thinking because of injuries, they temporarily place him there, or if they truly think that he's better suited to play outside corner in the SEC. I mean, he's got the size, right? It's like 6'2", 200 something. So he's got the size to play there. That's not what I'm concerned about. But I just feel like he played better when he was at star at Southern Miss than when he played outside corner. Like, going from Southern Miss to the SEC, it doesn't get easier to play outside corner or star. Like, it doesn't get easier to play any position going from Southern Miss, going from Group of 5 to the SEC. Personally, I liked him at Star. Like when he was getting recruited and pursued, I was like, yeah, at Star, I'm good with it. I think he could be a quality player at Star. And I'm very confused by this as well. I'm not confused. I'm questioning this as well, just because Sharif, Denson, and Aaron Gates are both out, or not full go at the start of camp. Josiah Davis didn't play last year, right? And of the 3 in the spring game, he's the least impressive. So Josiah Davis, a roll of the die, right? And that's kind of it that you have at Star. So I would think that you can look at Michael Caraway Jr. and say, all right, we're going to play you at Star because you've been able, like similar to Triquez Bridges going from safety, where, don't forget, Triquez Bridges' story, high school corner, went to Oregon, high school safety, went to Oregon, moved to corner. And then when he came to Florida, it was, hey, I want to go back to safety because that's my original spot. So he moved back to safety. And then because of injuries, he moved back to corner. So Florida's moved guys around the secondary because of injuries before. So you can look at Michael Caraway Jr. and say, hey, even if we initially viewed you as an outside corner, we need help at Star right now. So we're going to move you to Star. So then an outside corner, that also just gives you now more reps for, like I mentioned before, Ben Hanks Jr., Teddy Foster. Like that opens more reps for those guys like Cormani McClain. Like Cormani's a tremendous athlete. Just an incredible athlete. Great size, great speed, fantastic athlete, but very raw. Still has a lot of development to go. I feel like that'd be a pretty good sign to say, all right, well, now we're going to give you as many reps as we possibly can because that's the best way to develop you right now. It feels like that'd be a good approach. I think corner is wide open right now. I think, or at least for depth spots, I do think the starters will be Dijon and Devin Moore when they're both healthy. But right now, I think corner, there's a lot of snaps available. Hopefully, young guys can take advantage of that. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free, representing the podcast and on YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Talk more Florida Gators football for Locked On Gators or Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI, and we'll see you all next time.